Why the new birth places us in the realm of the supernatural? Now, the truth is that prayer and praying stimulate supernatural experiences. As we give ourselves to prayers, that realm into which we have been called will become a practical experience in our lives. You're welcome to another episode of Logos, where our lives are transformed by the revelation of Christ. In the previous episode, we looked at the ministry of prayer, and we emphasized that every child of God has been called to the ministry of prayer, and the preaching of the gospel cannot be effective except we complement it with personal commitment to prayer, praying for people and praying for the cause of the gospel. Today, we'll be looking at supernatural experiences in prayer. The man born again has been called by God into a life of the supernatural. Our birth as Christians is a birth by the supernatural God. The Bible says in 1 John chapter 5 verse 4 that whatsoever is born of God overcomes the world. And this is the victory that overcomes the world, even our faith. 1 John 4:4 says that little children be of good cheer, for greater is he that is, and you have overcome them, for greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. So when we came into Christ, what happened to us is that the supernatural life and experiences became our heritage. We became bona fide partaker of supernatural experiences. And it implies that our everyday lives should be punctuated with supernatural experiences. Hence, the promise of God through Prophet Joel readily comes to mind. In Joel 2:28, Joel said, in the last day, I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and daughters shall prophesy. Your old men shall dream dreams, and your young men shall see visions. So this gives us an idea of what to expect when it was initially prophesied in the Old Testament. It already gave an hint of what to expect coming into Christ. During the dispensation of grace, it already gave them an idea of what to expect, supernatural experiences. Now, some of these things were exclusive preserve of some selected few back in the Old Testament. But now in our days, it is an outpouring of the Spirit, which eventually leads to different and various supernatural experiences. And so the man born again has been called into a life of the supernatural. So the Christian life should not be just that dry lifestyle where we just live like ordinary, natural human being. We are more than a man, having come into Christ. And Jesus also said the same thing to disciples. Let's look at it in Mark chapter 16. Jesus actually told the disciple the same thing. And, the whole idea of learning this is just for us to whet our appetite, to have a strong desire and expectation for the manifestations of the Spirit in our lives. Our lives should not be void of supernatural experiences. And by talking about supernatural experiences, I'm not just talking about the spectacular. Spectacular experiences like, okay, there is a shaking all over the place. That could happen too. Maybe you speak and suddenly the sun just turned dark. Now, those are spectacular. However, supernatural experiences that we see from time to time and regularly don't necessarily have to be spectacular. The mountains don't need to shake. The sea does not need to change colors before we can say something is supernatural. Now, but what Christ has called us to actually is not just a show of power. It is actually supernatural experiences to make us live good Christian life and to become blessings to other people. However, we must still establish and emphasize the fact that the Christian life is supposed to be a life of the supernatural, not necessarily spectacular. However, it should be supernatural. Let's look at what Jesus said in Mark chapter 16. Now, when we understand all this, we will see that the Christian life is sweet, actually. He has called us to a wonderful life. Mark 16, verse 15, from verse 15 to 17. Mark 16, 15 to 17. And he said to them, go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. He who believes and is baptized will be saved, but he who does not believe will be condemned. And these signs, let's pay attention to that verse 17. And these signs will follow those who believe. Now, so who believe what? Those who believe the gospel. It says certain signs will follow those who believe the gospel. And if you look at the list of those signs, while it is not exhaustive in this particular rendition, but I will say to you that by the time we look at it, if we group them together, we will simply say the supernatural signs will follow those who believe, because these signs are supernatural. Okay, let's look at it again. Verse 17, and these signs will follow those who believe. In my name, they will cast out demons. They will speak with new tongues. Casting out demons is actually supernatural. Speaking in tongues is supernatural. And Jesus said that these signs will follow those who believe the gospel. So believing the gospel introduces you to the life of the supernatural. Now let's look at verse 18. They will take up serpents, and if they drink any deadly thing, it will by no means hurt them. They will lay hands on the sick and they will recover. So we are soaked and absorbed in the supernatural life. But we must understand the fact that for the fact that we have been called into this kind of life does not mean that these experiences will be manifest in our lives automatically. It doesn't necessarily mean so. Because whether we realize it or not, the truth is that we have been called into the supernatural life to experience different supernatural things in our lives. But it is now our duty to do what it takes to make it become our practical experiences in daily lives. Paul told the Corinthians in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 12, he said, of a truth, the signs of the apostles was wrought among you in signs and wonders and mighty deeds. Supernatural experiences is our heritage, and we should crave for it to manifest. So it's not just enough to know that I have it. I must have that hunger, that desire, that consciousness of the fact that this is a life I have been called into, and I must give myself to what it takes to make it manifest in my life. And so the essence of what we're learning today is just to show that prayer is one of those things we need to do to make the supernatural become manifest in our lives. Now, so why the new birth places us in the realm of the supernatural? Now, the truth is that prayer and praying stimulate supernatural experiences. As we give ourselves to prayers, that realm into which we have been called will become a practical experience in our lives. So it could be there dormant if we don't do anything about it. But as a man gives himself over to prayer, and so this is talking about, like we have said in time past, laborious prayers, prolonged prayers. As a man prioritizes commitment to God, giving himself over to prayer constantly, and giving attention to what the Bible has said about praying without ceasing. What happens is that gradually, as it were in a subtle way, you just begin to see that you are beginning to see different things. Different things begin to happen. At times, it might start out with visions. At times, it might start out with the consciousness of God in your heart. At times, it might start out with the consciousness of the spiritual realm of God. You might even see things, open visions of the realm of God and all of that. But what happens is you don't even need to pray for it. Just be given over to prayer. Make prayer the major preoccupation of your life. Be given over to it. Solitary prayer, daily commitment to prayer, praying without ceasing. As you continue this commitment and you do not hesitate to give yourself over to it and to the discipline it requires, what happens eventually is that you begin to see these things become your experience. The same thing you have received as an heritage, as something that Jesus has bequeathed to you, the implication is that you begin to see these things come to pass in your life. I don't believe in a Christian life that is void of supernatural experiences. It actually does not exist. And if you are not experiencing this supernatural in various ways and in its various forms, it is not supposed to be something that will be elusive to you. You are supposed to be experiencing the supernatural. I'm not saying that you should place it above God. I'm not saying that you should seek the supernatural above and see it as something much more important than God. However, because it is yours, it has been given to you. You are not trying to get it. You have it today. All you need to do is just to give yourself over to the things it requires so that these things can start manifesting in your life. Because the way the Christian life is designed initially or originally is that we will be living in the supernatural. Healing the sick is part of it, like we read in Mark 16. And speaking in tongues is part of it. It is our heritage. And we need to lay hold on what belongs to us and bring it to bear and make it manifest. And that's the essence of what we're learning today. Let's look at Acts chapter 4, verse 31. We will see example of how prayer stimulated supernatural experiences. And that's our desire for you today, and my prayer that your hunger will be stirred up so that you can start looking forward to it, so that you can start expecting it. Acts chapter 4, verse 31. And when they had prayed. Now, notice that verse 31 started out with that expression, when they had prayed, which shows us that what is about to come after is as a result of their prayer. Okay? So, verse 31 says, and when they had prayed, the place where they were assembled together was shaking. And so there was a literal shaking of the venue of the prayer meeting. This is part of the spectacular supernatural experiences that people can see or see manifest in their midst. But it doesn't always happen like that though. However, it can happen from time to time. Okay? Verse 31 again, and when they had prayed, the place where they were assembled together was shaking, and they were all filled with the Holy Spirit, and they spoke the word of God with boldness. And so if you have a desire in your heart to see that which God has given you manifest in those supernatural experiences that God has given you, if you want to see it manifest, then it is time to start giving yourself over to prayers. So the admonition to pray without ceasing should be part and parcel of our lives. As we obey this command and we give ourselves over to it again and again, by the time those things will start happening, you might not even realize it. It happens in different ways. It's not a stereotypic thing that just happens in a certain way, different ways. And at times, it doesn't just come in a way you expect. And I will say to you that even if you have started experiencing it, it is time to fan it into flame. And one of the ways we can stimulate it and make it happen frequently in our lives is to make sure that we give ourselves to constant praying. Prayer helps a lot in this situation. Now let's look at another experience in Luke chapter 9. Luke chapter 9, verse 29. Luke 9, 29. And this is talking about Jesus. As he prayed, the appearance of his face was altered, and his robe became white and glistening. So as Jesus is praying, the fashion of his countenance, his look became a shining, bright light. That's how it looks like. And so as Jesus began to pray, he also, as a man, saw supernatural experience. Now that's another spectacular experience that a man can have in the supernatural realm that we're talking about. And like I said, it doesn't always have to be spectacular, but the spectacular can happen also. Okay? And so we should always look out for it as Christians. And remember the story of Paul and Silas too in Acts 16, 25 to 26. The Bible says that as they began to pray, the prisoners heard them. And not only that, after some time of prayer and singing worship to God, what happened eventually was that the place where they were, the prison, the foundation was shaking. Not only that, there was an earthquake, and the prison door flung open. So you really cannot totally estimate what can happen if you give yourself totally to prayer, especially at times when it is totally inconvenient. And so, the admonition is that when the time you feel least inclined to prayer is when you should even pray more. There are times when you just feel elated, you feel excited, and you just feel you just want to labor in prayers. It's good to give yourself over to prayer constantly when you feel like doing it. But I believe that times when you don't really feel like it, times when the resistance is high, is when you should pray the more. That's the example we saw in the lives of Paul and Silas. They gave themselves over to prayers. And so these supernatural experiences, they are not only meant for Bible days. And they are not only meant for people who lived in the days of the Bible. No, they are meant for all the children of God. And that's what Jesus said, that these signs, and we can paraphrase that to say, these supernatural experiences will follow them that believe. And that is why I said that you and I have been called into the supernatural life. And so because it belongs to us, we're not trying to get it. We already have it. What we should rather do is to now stimulate it by soaking up our heart into prayer. And so those 5 minutes prayer per day, we not cut it. You must be sold out to prayer. You must be given over to prayer. Prayer must become the major preoccupation of your life, so that apart from the solitary prayer you pray maybe in the morning, you should also spend the rest of your day praying, so that when your hands are not busy, your mind is actively involved in communion with God. And also, out of all the various supernatural experiences that a believer can experience, I personally believe that none is greater than the consciousness of God, the awareness of God's presence. That is supernatural. And it's my desire for you that you will start seeing and experiencing these things. Now, God is in you, no doubt. God is for you, no doubt. If you are a child of God, God is on your side. Not only that, God lives in you today. He is living in you. The Bible says in 1 John chapter 4, verse 4, little children, be of good cheer, for you have overcome the world. For greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. God is in you. However, it is not just enough to know that. You must be aware of it. Do you know that it's possible that you are conscious of God so much that God is more real to you, even to your physical senses, much more than the physical environments that you live in? It's possible. Yes. You can become so conscious of the person and the presence of God to a point where you are literally conscious of the presence of God in your life. So what I'm talking about today is, above all, strive. It's good to desire visions, dreams, and all of these supernatural experiences that we have talked about earlier, and it's wonderful. Well, above all else, I'm encouraging you to shoot for being aware of the presence of God. And the way it happens is that you need to continue in prayer and labor more in prayers as you continue to pray. And so it should be a consistent thing. It should be a lifestyle. Prayer is not supposed to be a panic button that you only press when there are issues. Prayer is not just supposed to be something you do when things are not going well. If you will make up your mind to make it a lifestyle, one of the things we start saying is that you just notice that your heart will start getting aware of the presence of God. And I believe that is the greatest supernatural experience any heart can have, to be conscious of the presence of God. Imagine what it means to be at perfect peace in the midst of chaos and impending danger. That is what the consciousness of God's presence can do for you. When a man is conscious of the presence of God, he lives like God on earth. Yeah, it's a lot easier to live like God on earth when you are conscious of his presence, because you just know that you carry God. The same way that boat was turbulent and Jesus was at peace in the midst of that turbulence, you also can be at peace in the midst of turbulence if your heart will become totally and absolutely aware of the presence of God. And this is what prayer can do for you. We have said in one of our previous episodes that God is the central personality in prayer. So when we move, the more we stay with God in prayer, the stronger the consciousness of His presence will be in our heart. And so I encourage you, give yourself to prayer. Pray today, pray tomorrow, pray in the morning, pray in the evening, pray in the afternoon. When you are driving, pray. When you are about to sleep, pray. When you wake up, pray. Just give yourself over to prayer again, having God as the central personality when you pray, and being fully conscious of Him, or cultivating that consciousness by focusing on Him when you pray. As you do this, the wonderful thing, which I see as a wonderful miracle, will start happening in your heart. And what is that miracle? You will start getting conscious of the presence of God. God wants to show Himself to you in a greater way. And I say to you, open your heart by giving yourself over to prayers. Amen.